Hello, and welcome to today's ICMI webinar. We're glad you've joined us for hearing what they aren't telling you, measuring and optimizing the self-service customer experience. I'm Tim McElgan, Editorial Manager and Principal Analyst at the ICMI, and I'll be your host for today's session. I do have a few housekeeping notes before we get started. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, simply hit F5 or Command R, depending on which platform you're using, to refresh your browser window. If you need more assistance than that, just click on the yellow help icon below the slides and somebody will get right with you. We do encourage you to ask questions at any time during our conversation. To do that, just type your question in the Q&A window on the side and hit the submit button. And then if we have time at the end, we'll make sure to answer as many of those as we possibly can. Today's presentation will be available on demand shortly after the completion of the live event. So if you enjoyed the presentation today, please share that with your colleagues. You'll get an email reminder as soon as that is available. Finally, thank you very much to NICE for sponsoring today's discussion. And with that, let's meet today's panelists. Jennifer Passini is Head of Experience Consulting at NICE. She's been in the voice of the customer experience industry for close to 25 years. Jennifer supports clients through design, execution, and evolution of voice of the customer programs. She manages a global team of VOC subject matter experts who are the repository of best practices in VOC capture, reporting, and actionability. Jennifer has a doctorate degree in applied experimental psychology with an emphasis on consumer behavior. And she's a proud soccer and baseball mom, so we know that she's constantly busy after work and on the weekends. We're very happy to have you with us today, Jennifer. Thank you. Josh Streets is the CEO and founder of the Scoreboard Group Consulting, a company focused on partnering with HDI and ICMI to help communities find and implement the right technologies to improve the employee and the customer experience. Josh is also ICMI's technology practice leader, working with organizations across industries to accelerate their digital transformations. And thank you both for joining us today and sharing your insights with the ICMI community. Let's begin by putting our discussion in context. ICMI's recently completed State of the Contact Center survey found that 35% of contact center organizations classify themselves as omnichannel, and another 58% say they're multi-channel. Both of those are up from our last survey in 2021. Looking specifically at self-service, whether that's using an IVR, a self-service portal, or both, a significant majority of contact centers said they now support self-service. And our conversations with practitioners across the industry make it clear that customers now expect a self-service option, and their perspective on a company or a brand can suffer when that option is not available or is ineffective at addressing the issue that they're trying to solve. Josh, I'd like to start with you. Can you share your views on the critical features of self-service channels from the perspective of the customer? What are they looking for when they interact with self-service?
Sure. Yeah. The research that you mentioned and all the research I'm seeing in addition is really saying that more and more customers are willing to use it. And in some cases, they're even, I'd say, now expecting it, right? So we're seeing that across the board. And there's a lot of things to be careful with as you're building something like this. So I'd say consumers from my lens are looking for four things in general. One, it's easy to use. And I think that it really probably differs across even demographics, right? So within those customers, we're trying to be, in some cases, all things to all different demographics. So let's just use our oldest generation or the boomers, right? So those that were born before 1960, they'll use it even. If it's not forced, if it's simple, they don't want a 50-page wiki anymore. They want it to be, easy to use for them. Second is it just has to be accurate. So you think about the generation under that and the Gen Xers, born between, I think, 61 and 80-ish. Possibly your guys' generation, not sure. We don't have to compare birth certificates, no worries, but accuracy is important, right? So we've aged like a fine wine, but we've seen also the rise of the information age all the way to the automation age, to a point where we just want it to be accurate. Just give us the information that we need and let us move on with our days. Third thing is really, I want to be able to take action on it. So you think about the millennials and that demographic, and while it's great information that they might be self-servicing or getting pushed to them, they want to move with it, right? They want to actually go forward and do something or architect something with that information that they've got back. And then last but not least, seeing increasing numbers of clients, consumers saying it's got to be mobile. Gen Z, this current generation, they want it on their phones. And by the way, all of these different groups, I would say, want all of these things. But I think the priority or the urgency of each of those probably varies a little bit depending on who it is. So there's a framework, right? And I know those 4 things are key to it. And I know Jennifer and team do this and do it very well. But that's what I'm seeing, hearing, and feeling from a self-service from a consumer lens perspective.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Jennifer, you've obviously been studying consumers for a long time, getting deep in terms of psychology, what they like, what they don't like, and why. So I'd like to ask you, what have you found are the most important characteristics of self-service channels from the customer experience?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think everything that Josh mentioned is 100% true. A couple of other things that I would add from a customer perspective is that self-service is really about encouraging self-enablement, meaning they want to do it on their own. They're choosing channels because they want to be self-enabled. And so when you think about that from that context, self-service absolutely has to be completely self-enabled. If an organization commits to self-service, then you have to think through a journey and orchestration of that journey that leads to a customer being able to achieve what they want themselves. And so whether that's through chat, IVR, digital experiences, through your mobile app, the customer has to be able to achieve what they want and have their needs met through a self-serve capability. If you can't completely commit to self-enabled experiences, self-service is probably not the right step yet until you can do that. The other thing is that one thing that we've learned, just because you mentioned early on that, omni-channel and multi-channel, there's certainly a difference between omni-channel and multi-channel. And I think omnichannel is the perception is that it's seamless. So one thing that we've found is that consumers are on a non-linear journey with the companies that they work with. And even though they may initially prefer and choose self-service channels, they want to seamlessly be able to engage with somebody too. So the ability, when you're leveraging, for example, self-enabled IVR, self-service IVR. If you have something that's not going well, you want to be able to seamlessly be able to be transferred to a live agent so that you're not wasting time, and all of that information kind of carries over. And I think when we talk about omnichannel, we define omnichannel, that's really what we're trying to achieve. So seamlessness is another aspect that leads to success. And then probably the most important thing from a customer perspective, if you ask any customer when they're working with a company, and I think it's only highlighted by what we just went through with the pandemic, they want everything to be easy and frictionless. And so what that means is somewhat up to discussion, because I think it can be defined in a lot of different ways. But in general, the way that we consider it as we're delivering solutions is that we don't just want experiences to be easy. Of course we do. We want to make sure that it's easy and it meets needs and expectations.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's the rallying call now, I think, is what do we want? Everything. When do we want it? Right now. But yeah, and as a consumer, there's nothing more frustrating to me than providing information more than once. It just, and especially now that I'm in this industry, studying this industry, it gets me even crazier. Jennifer, staying with you, what are the greatest benefits from the contact center organization's perspective? So cost management is obviously one of the reasons that, we deploy tools. I don't think that's the most important consideration. Our research backs that up. What are the other top benefits from the contact center's perspective of the self-service?
Sure. So I remember having conversations with some of my clients early on about self-serve. And when I would meet with customer-facing organizations about self-serve, they're like, wait a minute, hold up. We don't necessarily want self-serve because you're taking away what we do and making it a automated experience. We're not sure we agree with that. But the reality is that there are benefits to the contact center, not only in terms of operational effectiveness, but also in terms of allowing them to focus on the things that they really should be focusing on to deliver high value experiences for those questions and issues and problems that come up. So from a cost perspective, obviously self-serve channels enable customers to do things on their own. So, in some cases, we could be looking at 8,000% increase or decrease in cost just from having, live agent versus self-serve experiences. So there's that cost benefit to the contact center. The pandemic, if you talk to any contact centers in any industry in 2020 and 2021, they would talk about how their volume within the contact center had exploded. Increased exponentially, so much that they couldn't balance the calls coming in, and it was creating really negative experiences for their customers and negative perceptions of the company. So the ability to be able to enable self-service experiences from that standpoint helps with that volume reduction. But from an agent perspective, they're focused on the most valuable experiences rather than those little things that come up that really should be self-serve experiences. So that's one benefit. But there's also the benefit that we can't ignore for customers. Customers are moving more to self-serve, self-enablement expectations. So as you mentioned early on in the webinar, Tim, customers' expectations for organizations that aren't delivering on them. Those customers will move to organizations that do deliver on self-serve experiences because they do want to be more in control of what they want to experience. So there's a benefit to customers, there's a benefit to agents, there's a benefit, operationally and cost-wise to organizations as well.
Great. Josh, what benefits would you add? How would you rank them? Does it differ for different industries and verticals in your experience?
I agree with Jennifer that where it's started and where it's at now has changed pretty dramatically. And I think it will only continue to, elicit some really good conversation. And it's really efficiency or effectiveness, right? It started out with a lot of efficiency and cost savings and deflecting and getting some dollars back to the bottom line, right? From a just budgetary perspective. Now we're hearing it from more of an effectiveness standpoint, as she mentioned, in terms of customers are expecting it. It's not necessarily just table stakes. It's something you have to continue to move forward. So I always like to break it down with clients looking for technology like this to say, what's most important at your organization right now? And of course, a lot of times I get the response, both, right? We'd like to save money, but we'd like to improve the experience as well, because that's going to save us money in the long term as well. So what are those use cases specifically that can do both of those things? And how do you prioritize and rank those across all of the different options, right? So chatbots, agent assist, next best action, machine learning, self-service, text deflection, IVR automation. There's so many different ways you can go with all of the tools in a contact center as a service platform. Now let's narrow into, what are you looking to do over the next 1 to 3 years? Where are the pain points? Where are you hurting from a just pure data metrics perspective? And how can we address those with the technology?
Yeah, and you should really leverage what you know. What you have and what you know to direct those efforts. So, I was working with a regional bank several years ago, and they found that most of the calls coming into their contact center, this is pre-pandemic. So, they found that 20% of the calls coming to their contact center were about checking balances. And it made them pause a little bit, because do you want your contact center agents just checking balances for customers when that can easily be tackled through digital access or through an automated system? And so, really taking advantage of what you know to direct those efforts is a way to go. And when you start to look at the call volume in terms of how much effort it's taking to not only take those calls, but resolve customers' issues with very simple experiences and tasks, those costs really start to add up.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Josh, we've looked at benefits, right? So I think we also need to look at how self-service strategies can miss the mark. I know that you work with a lot of different clients. What are some of the problems you've encountered as contact centers look to integrate self-service into either multi-channel or omnichannel environments?
I'll start with, to kind of rally off Jennifer's statement as far as those trying to boil the ocean and do it all right away, right? So she mentioned the low-hanging fruit and do what you know. Take the information that you have that tells you that you can do something very quickly and efficiently to make a time to value fast for the tool and the technology. So that's number one, is get very clear on what that low-hanging fruit is, how it's measured, and then get something in place to address it. But then I'd say the other two on top of that is it's data discipline and just getting the foundation right behind a lot of this, making sure you've got the governance, the different warehouses, lake houses, information that's necessary, even if it's not in a format like that, to basically gather that information to leverage the self-service, the automation, the AI. And then the third thing I'd say is just having a strong KB game or knowledge base, having the articles, having them updated, having them ready to be utilized or leveraged by the technology to actually get the benefits that you're looking for. So a lot of times this happens either concurrently or slightly before some of these tools and getting them into place. But the stronger they are as you head into it, the more success, the more results you're going to have long run. I think there's still a learning curve that's happening there with folks understanding exactly what they need to get in place, and having teams that have been through it before, have done it before, that can come in and give guidance and direction, I think is a step in the right direction if you don't have that internal knowledge or manpower, womanpower, and beyond.
Sure. Yeah, and the digital transformation always makes a point, start from where you are. And the difficulty is, where are we? How do you know that? And you really have to put, I think, that work in ahead of time so that you can identify early targets and long-term success, right? So let's now move on to a critical question that we're going to address today. Effectively capturing and acting on voice of the customer and voice of the agent, which I think is equally important. Acting on those insights is a critical success factor for most brands. And in the self-service framework, capturing those insights would seem to be pretty complicated. Jennifer, can you talk about the challenges to building an effective voice of the customer or voice of the agent capability in a self-service environment? And we'll talk about, how do we overcome those challenges in a moment.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to consider just what customers experience when they choose a self-serve channel. And that's the challenge in itself, is that the difference between a self-serve channel and a assisted channel, we'll just kind of throw a lot of different channels in that assisted bucket. But the difference is that they don't have a face for the company. The face for the company is an automated system or a digital system where you don't have someone answering your questions right there. You don't have a face for the company that's friendly and personable and very professional. So you have you don't have those perceptions kind of bleeding in to your experience. It's just it's a experience that you're driving yourself. And so if a company hasn't thought through how that self-service experience is going to reflect on their brand, then they've made a mistake. And really the best way to consider that is through leveraging VOC to tackle how well those experiences are going. So it's not just about effectiveness. It's about, do these experiences reflect what you're trying to portray as a brand? Maybe you're just trying to portray easy and a frictionless experience, and you're able to accomplish that. But if customers think your experience is clunky, how are you going to know that if you don't ask? And that's really the intent of direct feedback. There are some challenges, of course, because part of having self-enabled experiences means that you need to be able to collect feedback in experience. It needs to be embedded. It needs to feel like a natural part of the self-serve experiences that customers have. And you don't want it to feel extra. Customers, don't, especially when they're choosing to do something on their own, they don't want to feel that they have to do something extra just for the company. And so figuring out a way to ask for feedback so it feels natural, it feels like a natural part of the experiences that they're having, is critical. And it really requires that you map out the experiences that they're having, the journey that they're going through, and asking relevant questions, asking contextualized questions, asking what you know, leveraging what you know to ask the next the best question, and then leveraging that information to support the next best action that you take.
Yeah, and of course that results in a ton of data, and then that means you've also got to make sure that you not only capture that data, but you actually do something with it, right? So I think that that's a challenge for many organizations, and as a lot of organizations don't even know what they have. So that's another part of the journey for them. Josh, what are some of the inherent challenges you would point to that solution providers and contact center customers need to focus on and solve for?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that piece around data. And so we just did this ICMI session at Expo a couple of weeks ago, where we asked them kind of how mature they were in terms of their data principles and kind of getting those things aligned. And it was a very small number, which indicated why the room was so packed. We actually had people on the back wall spilling all the way out into the hallway for the most part that were there to really understand, what does this mean for me? And where do I go forward? So we talked a lot about, and I continue to talk a lot about this structured and unstructured data. And while it's very easy to get to the structured information, you know, the reviews, the scores, the customer effort, NPS, CSAT, the base numbers, I love what Jennifer's talking about in the unstructured feedback that you can gather throughout those, you know, journeys and processes. And that's really where we're focusing a lot of our time around figuring out what they want for their ease, either from a customer or an agent standpoint. So if you can't get to that, there's some creative ways to get to it using these tools. But I think with all of this talk around technology, sometimes we forget about the good old-fashioned focus groups. And that's definitely a trend I've been seeing as well. What better way, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or even in person, to get into a room and just talk to customers or talk to agents or frontline teams to say, you know, what would make this easier for you to use, and capture that information and do the analysis on it, just like it would be if it were over the phone or through another contact channel. What are our people saying? You know, where are the processes that are creating pain that could be easier from both sides of the fence, so to speak? So it's that is really the hot topic for a lot of folks that I'm seeing that are looking at the future or modernizing their experience overall.
Great. I appreciate that that insight, Josh. And I think that segues nicely into a question of how do solution providers and contact centers find and implement those solutions to not only capture voice of the customer, but to maximize the benefit that they can derive, not just in the context of the self-service channels, but across the entire multi or omni-channel contact center operation?
Yeah, it's getting complex, right? But there are ways to make it simpler by choosing the right provider or providers. But with all of these tools having to talk to each other and come together, the more you can get a lot of that same information from the same place, the easier it makes to really have an ecosystem designed. And if you don't have all of that figured out, we're always recommending the roadmap, right? So which order do you have to do this in? Where do you have to kind of brush up from what you've already got now, and then figure out exactly who can provide what you need moving forward? And if you don't understand how it all works together and how it all feeds one system to another, it can be very difficult to even think through the complexity of what all steps do I need in order to get to this modernized, self-service solution. And the things that our customers are asking for, our agents are asking for, hot topic, but where do we even begin? And I like Jennifer's statement around, what's the brand promise? What's the North Star? Where are you trying to get in the next 3 to 5 years from human to bot augmentation? So I think that's my suggestion, or what we follow right now.
Yeah, and recognizing that this isn't just a bolt-on, right? You don't just buy a tool, put it into use and hope for the best. There's a lot of thinking, planning, road mapping that needs to go into this. And this is kind of an aside, but one of the things I found fascinating was a study that found that if people are interacting with an AI bot and they don't realize it's a bot, when they do realize it, they get really angry, right? Because they feel like they've been fooled, I guess. So those are the types of considerations you might not bring to the table in the beginning of the process that you really need to sort of think through. Jennifer, let's go right back to our webinar abstract. With every customer creating their own experience, they're choosing different channels at different times. As you pointed out, it's not one or the other. It's whatever fits, the best at the best time. And how can your organization know what customers' expectations are? We talked a little bit about that, but if you could expand on that and be sure that they're actually meeting those expectations. Because again, as somebody who's not in there deploying and developing this technology, it looks like a really, really tough job of how do you both allow people to have self-service and then capture voice of the customer when they're not directly interacting with you either through voice or through text.
Right. So there's, in terms of, whether self-service is effective or not, there's certainly operational things that we can look at. So, usage, drop-offs, time spent, whether they go to a different channel after leveraging self-serve. So, are they starting somewhere and then having to call someone or interact with somebody when they don't want to? But then, voice of customer also informs that. So if we have negative sentiment coming from interactions that we're analyzing, or we have negative feedback coming in for specific reasons why people leverage a self-serve channel, it gives us an opportunity to take a hard look and figure out what's happening. In some cases, to understand preferences and expectations, we have to ask, did this meet your need? Did this meet your expectation? In other cases, we can leverage what we're hearing through the conversation to know whether it's effective or not. So we can tell whether an issue has been resolved or whether it's still outstanding. If the customer walks away from the self-serve interaction and we know that it's not been resolved, then we can collectively look at those things and address the experience. So there are operational and voice of customer inputs that I would consider in exploring the effectiveness of self-service. At the end of the day, the biggest thing is that self-serve should lead to cost savings. Operationally, it should lead to better experiences for customers, so better sentiment, higher levels of satisfaction, which leads to loyalty. If you're not effectively delivering on self-serve, and that's what customers expect, they'll leave. And you'll see results through attrition.
So help me sort of visualize this. I'm trying to understand, how do you ask those questions in a self-service context, right? I mean, are these surveys that are going to be popping up? What's sort of the nuts and bolts of capturing that voice of the customer in a self-service environment?
Yeah, the best thing is to embed it. So either have the questions as part of the experience so it feels like they're still interacting, or to have the feedback captured shortly after. So in some cases, it's not completely possible to embed feedback opportunities, but where we can, and I strongly, when I'm helping clients think through what their workflow should be for feedback, I strongly encourage that they consider how best to capture feedback in the experience. But that also means that if we do it well, that we're leveraging what we're hearing to ask the right question. I think that we can all think through feedback opportunities that we've had where they ask a question like, why are you asking this? This makes no sense to what I just experienced, or what I just, or to what I set out to do initially. So why are you asking this question? It's very weird. It's very weird that you're asking this question. Or worse, that I've had a negative experience. Why are you asking if I'm satisfied with my experience? You already know I had a negative experience. So we have to leverage all of the information that we have through the interaction, through the system that we have, which CX1 does really well, by the way, to ensure that we're asking the right question based on the experience that the customer had. So, again, contextualized feedback is the way to go. Embedded, making it natural, part of the experience is what I would recommend.
And Josh, I mean, you were working with clients. What's your process for helping them figure out which questions to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I subscribe to the notion of simplicity as much as possible, right? It can be overdone. And if you're trying to do it on every single part of the journey, it can get a little overwhelming from a customer standpoint. So what are the actual touch points where it makes sense to ask the questions of how things are going and how can you do it simple and easy? So I liken it to almost like our voice assistants. Like sometimes we're asking Siri or Alexa a question and we'll get on occasion a response of, did I answer that correctly? Right? And they're really in the background determining whether, it's getting stronger, smarter, intelligent in resolving questions. So there's data there. But that's a very simple yes or no. Or even if you're, as just yesterday, walking out of a airport terminal restroom, smiley faces, was the restroom clean? Just click one on your way out. It's gonna, be easy. You'll be able to do it in a second or two. And it's really changing in terms of not being a long drawn out process and needing to be done on the end of every interaction, but at key points throughout that journey where it makes sense to just collect any type of information you can. And if they're willing to give you more than a smiley face or a yes or a no or a thumbs up or thumbs down, I think we're all in the space that will take it, right? We'll take any other additional information, whether it was extremely great or extremely poor, if you've got it to share with us, because that's going to help us learn, get better, and re-engineer what we need to make this more consumer or even agent friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument that says the negative feedback is even more valuable than the positive, even though it's harder to take. We do have some questions I want to get to, and let's see. I'll ask Jennifer to start, and Josh, if you'd come in on the with your thoughts. So, Rob Dwyer asks, can you discuss containment rate Can you discuss containment rate?
Is that question to me? I'm sorry, Tim.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jennifer. If you do have an answer for that, you start, and then Josh, if you've got anything to chime in on, please do.
So in terms of containment rate, I think that I'm assuming that you're referring to your ability to manage everything within a self-serve channel. And that's where the operational metrics come in. So self-serve is only effective if you can not only make it easy, but make it so that it accomplishes and customers have success within that channel. They can accomplish what they want to. In order to measure that, you need a combination of a lot of data sources to do that. But operationally, it's drop-off rates, it's success rates within a channel from a VOC standpoint. It's a combination of sentiment and direct feedback, probably. Josh, do you have more to add there?
No, well said. I think there's a lot of focus on this as those who are looking to build these out or looking to prove out or, basically measure the success or accuracy of some of these tools. So I hear a lot about containment rate specific to IVR, but then bounce rate, all of the different metrics that come with all these different self-service tools, and starting to put some maybe even benchmarks around within the industry, much like we've done for service level, handle time, occupancy, all the traditional contact center metrics. There's some key things out there, depending on the channel or depending on the tool, to really look at. And a lot of them are named as containment rate, but you got to get very clear, almost like a data dictionary and glossary around what are these metrics that are going to truly measure the success. How are they formulated? Are they all called containment rate? But really, in the end of it all, it's getting to the same level of value from an output standpoint and being able to measure success as we have been able to do on the ACD side, or the queuing logic and Erlang and all these other tools for years. So hope that helps, Rob, and agree with you. You have to be looking at it, and we have to be talking about it in this type of conversation, just as we have some of the other metrics that have been around for the last several decades.
Josh, I'm going to have you start on this next question. Jeff Sheehan asks, what are you seeing customers doing to evaluate the crucial value irritant items and their business impact, and how do they discover self-service opportunities from that analysis?
So evaluate the crucial value irritant items and their business impact and how they discover self-service opportunities. So I guess if you think about pulling all of this information together and putting it side by side in terms of what call drivers are coming in from a dissatisfaction standpoint, or if there's any key themes that are popping up there, and then doing probably a little, not to get super nerdy here, but as a data guy, I like to get into the deep value, right? What is this doing to us online, digitally? Is it giving us a black eye from a customer experience standpoint? And, how much is that hurting things in the long run? And what does this mean from an operational perspective? Are there other things that we could be doing to streamline this, or very simple, easy fixes, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, that we could be putting in place to make this an easier process for our customers? We've seen some just move 2 to 3 steps right out of the journey map in those discussions, right? Oh, wow, we didn't realize we were making them go to this and this and this. If we just put this practice in place, we could grab that information and not put them through all of that trouble. So going through exercises like we're talking about, doing it the right way versus just the quick way is key to really figuring out what self-service opportunity makes the most sense, and then having those measures then that you used in the front end to look at the progress in the back end to tell that story, right? To market it internally. A lot of times it's here was the issue, here's what we did about it, here was the result. Now, what are the other 3 to 4 to 5 things that we could be looking at next year from a continuous improvement, or that we need funding for to continue to add these additional tools into our stack or turn them on in the system to continue to get more value?
Right, and I mean, I've always been an advocate for, especially after experiencing specifically a credit union I did business with, acquired another credit union. They did a lot of changes. And I got into the IVR, and it was a nightmare just to figure out what they were going to let me do, supposedly. And my attitude has always been the CEO, the CFO, and every other stakeholder needs to operate this thing so they actually know what the customer is going through when they hit your system. Jennifer, what can you add to that on that question?
I would just say that, if there are, as Jeff mentioned, there are some low-hanging fruit places to get started. So, looking at call types and looking at it and say, we don't really want our customers talking to a live agent about these things. We want to encourage self-service. A lot of organizations were forced to do that during the pandemic, and so we saw a lot of acceleration around those things. But looking at call type and realizing what experiences you would like as an organization to be self-serve, given the calls that are coming in. The other thing that I would recommend in terms of low-hanging fruit is to look at what self-serve experiences are failing and leading to calls to the contact center. So, that's where the omnichannel perspectives come in. Are they starting somewhere but landing somewhere that they don't prefer? And in those cases, that's a very customer-centric approach to supporting self-service transformation, because you can focus on those things where, the customer really wants to do this on their own. They want to be self-enabled, but what's happening right now is they don't feel that way, and it's not working out, and it's leading them to have to call or to reach out to the company. So those are probably the 2 areas of low-hanging fruit. But in general, I think it's important that you leverage all the information that you have. The other thing that I would just make as a general recommendation is don't move a self-service route unless you can fully deliver on it. And I talked about that early on. Just, make sure that it's completely self-enabled. If it's not, then you're not ready for self-serve in that particular area. And it helps in just setting customers' expectations as well. When you say that something is self-serve, they're intending to be able to do it on their own.
Right. That leads really nicely into the next question we have here, which is, what steps should companies take to understand their customers' digital journey? Jennifer, you could start on that.
Yeah, so I think it starts with, first you have to understand the customer journey. So if you don't, start there, please. Understand the customer journey and all the micro journeys associated with experiences. So start there. And then from there, map your self-serve and digital journey on top of that. Have it as an overlay of where you want to offer self-serve experiences, or where you think it would be a good idea based on customers' expectations to deliver on self-serve experiences, and then leverage that overlay to support your transformation strategies. You can prioritize that way. Especially if you know that something is something that customers experience a lot, that could be a priority for you to say, it would be really great if we could create an effective self-serve strategy here. But it starts with understanding customer journey and then overlaying with a self-serve and digital journey. That's the best place to start.
Yeah, can you add on that, Josh, in terms of, what specific kind of concrete steps should customers take to understand their customers' digital journey?
I agree 110% with the complete path that she mentioned. So I know there are others that are still trying to align inside their four walls, right, within the company to get to that place. So I guess I'll just speak on, the alignment and the readiness that she also mentioned is what is the brand promise from an experience standpoint? Does it need to change? A lot of folks have a CX vision statement, and with the amount of self-service and automation and potentially a voice call becoming a premium experience in the future, do you need to change that, or does it remain the same? So that's one. Number two, do you have executives aligned around this? What is that right level of self-service and automation that makes sense for your customer experience? Not everybody is going to want to be 100% automated. They still want some level of human interaction, or there's got to be some level of complexity where it's going to require somebody on the phone. So getting the CFO, CEO, COO, CIO, all the C-suite to align on that, and what does that future vision look like, can help you get into some of these use cases, can help you get into, do you have the right roles in place? Do you have the right job descriptions in place? Are you ready to make movement with this technology and movement with this kind of transformation to ensure that you can hit the ground running when the time comes?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that myself. It's like if you'd like to contact a live payment agent, it's going to cost you whatever it is, a couple bucks, $5. But if you use our automated system, then we're not going to charge you anything, which to me is possibly a negative brand decision, but nonetheless, it's one that these folks take. I'd be fascinated. It suddenly struck me. I would love to call Ryanair and find out, what their customer interaction is like, given what flying on that airline can be like. It's got to be pretty interesting. Next question we have here is, what are some of the ways that companies miss the mark when defining their digital-first strategies? And I'll again ask Jennifer to start, and then Josh, if you could chime in.
I think the biggest miss is when you define a digital strategy based on the cost savings the company hopes to achieve, rather than considering customer needs and expectations. So it's easy to slip into that, right? It's easy to say, if we self-enable this experience, we're going to reduce calls, or we're going to reduce interactions that cost us money. It may not be an interaction that the customer wants to be self-enabled on. It may be an interaction where they still want to talk to somebody or still interact with somebody. And so I think the biggest miss is when you don't have a customer-centric approach around your digital-first strategy. You just are thinking about, how you can create the same experience that you deliver in one channel in a digital space. That's probably not the right step. I think if you think back to, I supported financial services for many, many years. And I think that when I think about digital transformation in the financial services industry, I think about just what they've gone through of, initially it was about how can we just give access through a digital space. And then it kind of evolved into, okay, how can we deliver the same experiences through a digital space, which wasn't quite right. And now it's evolved to, how can we enable self-serve actions that customers want to take to their financial provider to meet their needs and access and move money and pay bills and all of that. And so I think there has been a real kind of transformation with even the industry, thinking through how to think through self-serve, and customer centricity has to be at the front.
Right. I think that's an important point, because the voice of the customer goes beyond what they tell you in response to the questions you ask them. It's also revealed in the actions that they take in using your system, right? So I think that it's critical to have that feedback loop where you're constantly evolving and improving on your digital interface for those customers. Josh, what would you say about missing the mark in terms of defining digital first strategies?
Yeah, well said, Tim. I think when you look at the pandemic and where we're at now and everything that's happened over the last several years, there's this theme of plan your work before you work your plan. And I think we had entered a moment in time where we were working our plan before we were planning our work, just to keep up, right, and make sure that we had what everybody needed in those situations where we're in a place now where, we've got teams, and it takes a lot of teams to pull things like this off successfully. As Jennifer mentioned, whether you're in financial services, marketing, operations, running the business, or in IT, there are a lot of different teams that are looking at digital strategy and their piece of it. And if you don't have somebody that's taking charge to align all of these groups around AI, automation, self-serve to create a strategy moving forward, then very quickly you're going to be in a situation where you've got redundant tools, redundant systems, you've got different people using different pieces in different organizations, which is sometimes okay depending on the size of the organization. But as it relates to the customer experience, as well as the internal employee experience, if all of that's not aligned by the end of this, and I don't believe there is an end to AI and automation. This is not a project or a program. This is the new norm, right? It's not going away. It's going to continue to iterate over time. You could be in a situation where you've got a total cost of ownership that is way beyond what it probably could or should be. Should you have taken that time to really think through what are all of the channels that we want to play in? What make the most sense for all of our customers? Can we personalize them, make them unique to them for the different personas that we've got or different demographics? And then beyond that, how do we basically create this roadmap or strategy forward to ensure that we're doing it in as few systems as possible for our agents? So we've got some clients, their folks are on 3 different screens using up to 10 systems to kind of bob through here. They think they're omnichannel. They're operating in a lot of channels. At the end of it, when you look at it pretty deep, it's really multi-channel, and there's not information flowing across the entire experience. So they've got to basically scrap everything they've done to this point just by the nature of modernization and timing to figure out now, is there a simpler and easier way to do this where I don't have 19 different tools, engines, applications, and I'm trying to piece it all together to move forward. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because whether I'm calling to speak to billing or I'm calling to speak to customer service or purchasing or whoever it might be, if I'm interacting with that company on a regular basis, I want that experience to be not exactly the same, but recognizably the same. I know who I'm going to be. I know what that company is going to be in terms of their brand, in terms of their voice, in terms of the way that they treat me. And I think that's really important. I think this is actually a great question because it goes back to something we discussed a little bit earlier. But how can a voice of the customer program help to understand customers' self-service preferences, which is what allows you to evolve and improve over time, right? Jennifer, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, initially, it's a great idea to ask if you don't know, because in some cases, as Josh mentioned, the systems are integrated and agents themselves or the call center doesn't have access to other channels used from a customer usage standpoint. So just ask them, did they use another channel prior to calling the contact center? That's important to, a broader definition around first contact resolution. So not first call resolution, but first contact resolution. So if a customer started in a self-serve channel and later called the contact center, that's most likely a problem. Because they are looking to have a self-enabled experience that ultimately has to be an assisted experience. So, asking as part of feedback, did they use other channels prior to calling the contact center can be indicative if you don't know. Hopefully you have systems that are integrated and you already know that and can highlight that in finance, but if you don't, it's worth asking. Again, feedback has to be embedded though in order to make that worth it. And so that's one way to do it. I think the other thing is just to explore whether needs are met or whether there's resolution. Keeping it in mind, especially within the contact center, most customers are calling because they have a problem, issue, or question. And so if they, especially from a servicing standpoint, if they aren't happy with that resolution, it may not because it's not resolved. But asking from a customer's perception, was their issue, question, or problem resolved or not is another critical question.
Right, and was it resolved to your satisfaction, not only because, yeah, my issue was addressed, but it was addressed in a way and it with a speed that was acceptable to me, right? Josh,
Exactly.
are you seeing any of the clients that you're working with using their voice of customer program to help them understand specific customers' self-service preferences?
Absolutely. And I think this is where this whole conversation around orchestration goes into play, right? And leveraging all that information to do everything that you can in your power, right? So I follow very closely NICE CX1 and a lot of those that have market share to try and predict, where are they going on their roadmap? What's the future of this look like? And then have to, get deep into what is edge computing, right? And how does that go beyond AI, and what could that possibly mean? So, literally using data points to say if somebody just went on your website and applied for, let's say, a home loan, and they basically were denied a home loan, and then they call into your contact center to talk about something else. How great would it be if you had that real-time information in there through CTI screen pop for the actual agent to see, hey, they just applied and were denied. Don't cross-sell or upsell or try to sell them a home loan. Don't try to do anything that, is going to anger them based on what we just learned from their last interaction where possible. So the more that we can do things in real time to understand what they're doing through all these different channels, and understand exactly, where they're at, what's happening, and then drive them there or meet them where they're at by using that information intelligently and giving it to agents intelligently, I think the better off we're going to be in our customers' experience. And by the way, they're giving up their data to these companies, right? They're giving up the information. They want that personalized experience. If I'm going to share all these things going on with me, I want you to tailor it to me. I want you to know me and basically treat me like the most loyal customer you've ever had. So I'm excited about the future. I'm excited where the space is going, what everybody's doing, because it's all rooted in the metrics and the data and how to use it to basically create better human experiences, not just for customers, but for employees too.
Yeah, it's interesting. The idea that if I'm a brand new customer and the first time I touch your contact center, whether it's with a human being or an automated system, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. What a huge boost. What a human kind of contact that creates. Jennifer, we're getting close here. We got about 8 minutes left. But I was just wondering, can you put on your futurist hat and talk to us a little bit, and without obviously revealing anything proprietary, but can you talk to us a little bit about the roadmap from NICE CX1's perspective? What's cool that's coming down the pike?
Yeah, so there's probably more cool things to talk about than what I could share for sure, but the focus on CXI and digital experiences and taking advantage of the fact that customers' experiences are linear and meeting their needs regardless of where they are is exciting for us, and that's certainly on our short-term roadmap. I think also, if you read anything within this industry, and Tim and Josh, I'm sure you talked about it tons this week at your conference, but the focus on AI, which has been, kind of a term that people have talked about for a really long time, but we're certainly getting a lot smarter about leveraging data that we have to create really great experiences. And if I were to think about, kind of what I'm most excited about is, I'm a data person like Josh, so having access to all of this data that creates really great experiences, consistently great experiences, is something that you'll continue to see from NICE moving forward.
Great, thank you. Josh, I'm going to ask you the same thing. When you put on your futurist hat, and maybe it's from a slightly different angle, what are the cool things that you'd like to see on behalf of the clients that you work with?
Yeah, it's really along the same line. So I don't get the early access to the roadmaps and see what's coming. It's all through, having conversations, seeing where things are going, trying to predict the future, so to speak. So I'm a little bit out of a loss compared to not being right in the four walls of a major technology player. But just where I see this all going by 2030, it's deep. And like Jennifer said, I don't have enough time to go into all of it. But just in terms of futurism and basically modernizing things across the entire spectrum. There's leaders, there's laggards, and then there's a lot of folks in between that. And understanding what that means and understanding, who's going to have the ability to do some of these things early, be a fast follower, and then we'll eventually, look to bring these things to market as the stakes change or the game changes, is going to be an interesting thing. As I think AI is a $25 billion or so, about to be a $125 billion software market by 2025. So it's not slowing down. There's a lot to keep up on. It's almost like a full-time job, understanding all the different pieces that are coming to light. But the more time you put into it, just like anything else, the more you're going to get back from it. The deeper you go into the data, the deeper you go into consumer behavior, the deeper you go into a lot of these things that Jennifer's team does, that our team does, sometimes even in partnership. You look at what are the right use cases, and then just overall studies that we can share back with people to say, here's was the situation, here's what happened, here's how it got better. And I see only more and more of those coming up.
Sure. And here are the questions that you need to ask your solutions providers, right? I mean, that's the other piece of it too, so that you get that going both ways. And I'm obviously not a Luddite. I'm working in this industry. I've been around technology my whole life, but it's also very important to remember with a tool this powerful, mistakes are going to be potentially devastating. So, I think that's the other piece of it, is just keeping that in mind and be very intentional and thoughtful about how we apply these incredibly powerful tools. Let's see, we're down to 4 minutes. Anybody else in the audience have a question? Go ahead and type that into the Q&A inbox, and we'll get those to our panel. Give you a couple minutes longer to do that and see what happens. Actually, I'm going to give you a couple seconds to do that. I'll be more honest. Okay, I guess we answered every single one of their questions without fail. So I'm gonna say thank you, Josh, so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Jennifer, it was great to meet you. Great to have this conversation. I look forward to continuing it in the future. Thank you very much to our audience. I do have a couple of notes, which of course I managed to push to the side before I write them to you. So give me just 1 second here. And yeah, paper. I'm still a paper guy, unfortunately. So, yes, that is all we have for today. Thank you to everyone in the audience who joined us. Thank you again for a great hour. I feel so much smarter after this conversation, thought-provoking, really, really useful for us and for everybody else in the audience, I'm quite sure. Thank you very much to NICE CX1 for sponsoring today's session. As a reminder to our audience, you'll receive a follow-up email that's going to include a link to the recording of today's presentation. So again, if you find this event interesting and useful, please share that with your colleagues. Once you leave the event, a short survey is going to pop up in your browser window. We'd appreciate it if you would share your feedback on this webinar, as it helps us tailor our programs and make sure that we're meeting your needs and your interests. And to you all, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here soon.